anniversary of
Yes, today is 1 year. Oh my goodness, time flies when you're having fun.
yes.
Today's conversation is our recap of, a look back. And I think it's a great time to have this conversation because for a lot of teams, it's the middle of the year, which is a good time to either evaluate or reset.
Hmm.
So let's jump right into the three things that we have seen impact the clients that we work with, the teams that we've engaged with. And at the highest level, those three things include looking at the traceability of the work that the team's doing from individual contributor up and that lack of traceability across those activities. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll talk about those critical roles that might be missing from teams that we sometimes put off, which is facilitators, strategists, but also looking across verticals that might be
Yeah.
siloed in your organization. And then also that opportunity to baseline what you're building. So, or what you already have created, and making sure you really understand that end to end experience. And so, in that conversation, we're looking for those of you that are watching, please jump in with questions and comments. But yeah, I'll let you jump into the first one.
Yeah, so that first one, if you're doing your tickers, the whole traceability issue, and I think part of that, and that applies really for all of your teams. Having that traceability helps QA, it helps marketing, it holds people accountable, and I think a huge part of that is, do you have that problem statement? Do you know what you're trying to solve so that you can have that traceability? If you don't have a good problem statement, what are you tracing back to? Same thing with QA. What are the things, based on those problem statements, based on what you're trying to solve, that helps them as well. So not just through the routine running scripts and doing their various task-based testing, but what's that mean in the bigger picture based on the problems you're trying to solve. And it's one of the things we often see. We go into projects and it's like, hey, just get to work on this X, whatever item, do a usability test, do a heuristic evaluation. It's like, well, where is that traceability? What's your problem statement? What are you trying to solve? And I'd say, about 50, 60, maybe even 70% of the time, no one can give a concise problem statement. Or you get 10 different ones depending on who you talk to. So, what do you focus on? What do
Yeah.
you test? What do you market? How do you prioritize, based on that traceability?
Yes, that's a really good point in terms of the team. We are brought in by decision makers, the stakeholders in the business, and we are then asked to partner with teams in some cases, the individual contributors on the team. And what we find is, as we dig into what we're being asked to do, to your point, we find that the individual contributors on the team don't necessarily understand how the work that they're doing on a daily basis traces back to something bigger, that Uber problem statement, that Uber opportunity. And so we then have to rally the team together to have them step back and understand what is it that you're truly trying to solve so that we can make sure that that work is being done correctly and effectively. I remember the project we had where it started with, and this is the interesting thing about the work that we do, it started with a QA team being asked to automate test cases.
Hmm.
And there was a struggle with automating test cases because the QA team didn't understand what success looked like in those test
Yes.
cases. And so as we did a little root cause analysis, what we recognized was there was a lack of, there was a gap in the Uber kind of, what problems are we solving for our customer, and who is that customer? What does success look like? So we were asked to come in and do all of that discovery work, to do all of that concept or application and service experience evaluation in order for the QA team to
Yeah,
ultimately automate those test cases. So you look at that and say, it's not just about UX, it's not just about your product strategy, it's about your teams actually being able to execute successfully.
exactly. And coming together and working on the same things with the same goals, with the
Mhm.
same understanding. Because the one thing I'll add that we also see on this kind of projects is talk to one team, they think the problem's A, talk to another team, they think the problem they're trying to solve for is B. And so you really don't have people stacking hands on the same page. Marketing is marketing the right type of solution, focus on the real problem you're trying to solve.
Mhm.
QAs doing their job based on that same Uber, as you called it, problem statement. So that's another biggie, is
Mhm.
people completely on different pages around what problem they're trying to solve.
That's why, in looking back, I think it's so the exciting part of what we do is to be, even when we were in house, looking at playing that glue or that bridge between disciplines and between different aspects or areas of a division. So different teams and roles. But when you think about that, there's also that need for facilitation
Yeah.
and for someone to take those ideas or those problem statements and usher them forward. And in a lot of cases, teams might be too close to that information
Yeah. Yeah.
to really be able to usher it forward. So having an objective perspective has been really helpful for us to see where once you jump in, you recognize, oh, there's no one driving this forward. Let's take
Yeah.
on that role. Even though we were asked to do this, we still have to take on that role to usher things forward. Or where you see silos across a business, just like in the scenarios where you have hardware, software components of a solution, and where we were asked or we've been asked to focus on the software experience, but you realize that that hardware experience and how the two play together is so critical. And so being able to get again bridge or be the glue between those different divisions is really important, because when you're working in an organization, when your head's down, sometimes you forget to look up and look at how or
Yeah.
where there are opportunities to bridge or collaborate. And the risk that you take in not having those gaps filled or looking at those bridges is you now risk not delivering the right solution, not
Or
delivering the right
broken.
experience, or a
Yeah.
broken
Or a
solution.
broken solution.
Yes, having something out on the market that's broken.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a great example, the whole hardware software. We have had that happen a couple of times where, and to be honest, a lot of times, especially if you're and we come from big organizations, they don't even know what they may be impacting. So it
Mhm.
is nice having that glue. You need that gap filled so that when some hardware change or interaction that involves a hardware is occurring, that those teams know, hey, what I'm doing over here with our software solution involves your hardware. And we've actually seen in really large companies where it was broken and no one even was aware of it because they hadn't looked at the silos existed. So Team A worked on their hardware, Team B worked on the software. When the two came together, that we're testing the software, but found out, hey, your whole experience is broken because you guys aren't talking. You're so siloed, you're not talking. And coming from some of those big organizations, I get how that happens.
Yeah.
You don't even know those people exist sometimes. Um,
Yes.
so yeah, you've got to fill that type of gap.
Yes, yes. And the beauty of coming at that sort of challenge from a human factors, user experience, customer advocacy lens is there is also that opportunity to look at that customer's experience in
Yeah,
that whole
yeah,
bridging the gap, ushering it forward. you're also looking not only at the internal operations and how those two hardware software example in that example, or where you have a product that strings along in a service, not only looking at
Yeah.
all of how those pieces work together, but thinking about your customer in that process is really the beauty of what I feel like over the years we've seen value in engaging with our clients.
Yeah. We've ended up being that, filling that gap. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so when you think about kind of that whole relationship between your products and your services, your hardware and your software, what that last kind of lesson coming out of our experiences has been was in many cases either someone within an organization recognized the need to bring us in to do that baseline end-to-end experience assessment,
Mhm.
or in the work that we are doing, we quickly realize there is no
There
baseline.
is.
And because of that, the work that we're doing is even more difficult in terms of delivering successfully because there's nothing to measure against in terms of success.
Exactly, and there are a number of reasons to have that baseline data. How do you know, one, how are you planning from a strategic perspective if you don't have any baseline data? How do you know when you've improved if you don't have that data? And how do you even know how you stack up? I mean, how do you compare against competitors? So
Mhm.
that end to end baseline is really important. I think it's also important to point out there are different ways. If you have a new product and it's not really there yet, you can still do early activities, whether it be via research, early prototype testing, beta programs. We used to gather a lot of baseline data so we would know, what are we missing, or how are we improving as we go forward? How are we stacking up against that competition? So you don't have to have a fully baked product out in the market. And I love to mention that to people. In fact, you probably want some baseline data before you have a fully baked product out there that you've spent tens of millions of dollars developing.
Yeah, no, agreed. And when you couple that with the idea around your roadmap,
Yes.
and I think you mentioned this,
Yes.
you really are not, you're doing yourself a disservice to manage a roadmap that's not based on some sort of baseline for success.
Yep.
At that point, you're starting to just do incremental, nitpicky, squeaky wheel, what matters to the business, but you're really not effectively looking holistically at the biggest opportunities that you have as a business.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Do you even understand the current state of your product
Right.
and your customers' experience with that? And there are a lot of ways to do that, even from the get go or early on or with existing data.
Mhm.
You can use sales data. You can use it, qualitative and quantitative data. So you've probably had surveys out there, or you've done interviews with people, or you've observed, right? So I think half of the things we end up figuring out is sometimes based on observation. I mean, that counts, right? So collecting all that baseline data to really understand where you stand is absolutely critical. And I like the end to end piece. So hopefully, if you're mature, your product's been out there, you should have some baseline for that end to end experience. Going back to what we talked about, for instance, the software hardware, it's not only about your space when it comes to having a baseline measure of that customer experience, not just the experience with your piece.
Oh, I like the fact that you said that. So it's looking at that baseline from your customer's lens, not the baseline of let's just test out our product, but it's got to be contextually and from a perspective or lens relevant to that consumer. That's a really
Exactly,
good
because think about it. Back to the hardware software, you're looking at an app that
point.
interacts let's say with the hardware component. If you're just testing your app without considering it in the context of that piece of hardware, for
Mm-hmm.
instance, a printer,
Mm-hmm.
your
And
app,
other apps and other things that you're
all
using.
kinds of things. I mean, your app can be the best in the world, best of breed. But that experience, that end to end baseline you would get if you did it properly, if it's not working with the hardware, guess what? you know, it's pretty bad. You're not going to stack up well to competitors. You're not going to be resolving any issues or problems for your customers. You're just going to be introducing problems. So,
Yeah, that's a good way to summarize it. You're introducing new problems in
mhm.
that regard. So to recap what we've talked about today, when we look at through the years and do our look back of our experiences in terms of engagement, why customers pay us or clients pay us, it's about that end to end that Deanne just mentioned, and the fact that you've got to baseline from your customer, consumer, end user's perspective. What is that end to end experience, not only of what you build or create, but of that entire ecosystem that we continually talk
Ecosystem.
about?
Yes.
Baseline your solution in that ecosystem. And then number two, what is that one? If you want to recap that one, Deanne?
Fill those gaps. That's in, when it comes to those silos, make sure someone is looking at all the pieces and everyone's on the same page. But also today, we know we have a lot of people wearing a lot of hats. And, think about that. What does that mean in terms of their workload? What does it mean in terms of their skill set? So, if you're a developer, maybe you can do user research, but, it's not
Yeah.
the right role. So, think about those kind of things, whether it be via training, be it via consultants to come in, with swoosh in, for small projects, things like that.
Yeah, and the key to what you just said is determine what you're missing by not filling those gaps.
Exactly.
What are you omitting, and the impact on the outcomes
Yes.
is really important. And then lastly, that traceability component. And so a lot of us are get stuck in that doer
Yeah.
space of just focusing on doing, and we forget that what we're doing has to trace back to either what is strategic, what is most important, what is most impactful.
Yep.
And that's where your big rocks, your customer problems, your opportunity statements around what you're trying to solve, those goals for your solution, those are the things that should be well defined and well
Yeah.
understood across teams, all the way down to individual contributors, so that you can ensure your teams are working effectively in terms of delivering success.
Yes, and you're delivering the same message, whether it's, support on the call, QA doing tests, or marketing, the problem they're championing that you're solving with your service or product.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Well, as always, great conversation. You know how to reach us. Have a great week, and we'll see you next